The man in the bath sat staring at the wall. He occasionally oscillated between deep and shallow baths. However, very few other changes took place in his life. The weather was cold, so the man sat in hot, deep water. He seemed to be lost in thought, only moving for the purpose of brushing sweat from his bulbous red forehead. On this particular morning, he sat pondering people. He proceeded to get more and more disgruntled. How plain people are, a bunch of opinionless goodies with the simplistic desire to not be baddies. He was a simple man who seldom recognized the boundaries of his own mind, a man whose idle chatter seldom matched his bland banker lifestyle. He was not someone who admired the freedom of a cockatoo. Alone in the steamy room, submerged in clear water, he had given himself few options other than partaking in the horrifying activity of thought. He had lived in Orfport for 10 years, but had few friends. He blamed all the people in Orfport for this. No one in Orfport is a good friend that sticks by my side, he would think. He hadn't thought that this might be due to the fact that Orfportisans didn't emulate dogs. They would stick by someone's side if they felt like it. The man's name was Fred. He worked as the branch head for a Borvog People's Bank. Fred didn't like to think of himself as a banker, preferring to allude that he was the Wallace Stevens of banking. Sure, he had gone to drab school of business and finance, but he was truly an artist in a suit and tie, an artist with a practical job. After a mere 30 minutes in the bath, Fred was thoroughly peeved by the state of the world. Maybe somewhere down near the center of the Fred onion, he was angry with himself. The Fred onion was very large, with a whole lot of layers. Yet perhaps way down in the murk of his mind, a toddler was rolling a red ball, screaming, "Are you all bullshit, Fred?" He stood up from the bathtub and pulled the plug from the drain. With a whoosh, dirtied water spiraled through the plumbing. Fred dried himself, then he put on his tan trousers, white long-sleeved shirt, and black velvet vest. He picked up his gold pocket watch and clipped the chain to a pant loop, then let the watch fall into the darkness of his front pocket. Fred headed for the entryway, where he paused to lace up his black leather boots. He opened the front door and walked out in the foggy and drizzling Orfport morning. He walked towards the gray car parked in his driveway. The car wobbled between being a generic get-to-the-coffee-shop car and a sexy, fast sports car. It looked as though someone had squashed a Honda into something emulating a Porsche 911. If any car could be unsure of its identity, it was this car. He got in the car and drove towards Bold Living in Coffee shop. Bold Living and Coffee had several large signs, but few of the Orfportisans. Yet no Orfportisan complained excessively because it took care of the Borvogian coffee drinkers' needs, and better yet, Fred's. Fred parked the squashed Honda directly in front of the coffee shop. The parking gods are in my favor, he thought. Fred was known to complain about parking in Orfport. Orfportisans, on the other hand, enjoyed that their town was not designed around limitless parking. More room for public parks, gardens, and walking paths. Who wants to look at a bunch of concrete, they would sometimes ask. After finishing a caramel vanilla mocha, Fred decided to go for a walk. Artists go for walks. Maybe if I walk, I'll be a better artist. The fact that he had never created much of anything in his life didn't hinder him from this thought. The only way an observer could rationalize Fred's self-identification as an artist would be if they watched him do paperwork. Fred loved paperwork immensely. He was very good at answering questions within the narrow bounds the bank wanted. Whenever he sat at his computer and stared at a spreadsheet, Fred felt pure, untamed joy blossoming from his chest. Fred felt guilty about his love for paperwork and banking. It was not something artists were supposed to enjoy. As Fred strolled through downtown Orfport, the gold chain on his pocket watch swayed back and forth. He paused to look at a little studio tucked in an alcove between two storefronts. Large abstract paintings hung in the windows. Peering in, Fred could see that vinyl records, chairs, the floor, and walls had also been painted. It seemed to Fred that this painter hadn't figured out where a painting was supposed to stop. The paintings had bright, unapologetic colors and swirling, playful lines. Eccentric faces and animals peeked out from the canvases. A few of the paintings had phrases written on them about the joy of life and shit like that. Fred didn't like abstract art. He had once heard someone say, abstract art is bad. It doesn't depict anything, so how can it be good? Fred liked to repeat this to anyone who would listen to him discuss art. Nevertheless, Fred decided to enter this painting-filled lair and have a chat with the dragon inside. The dragon was a man in his 50s. He had a scruffy beard and was starting to bald. Red hair hung from the sides of his head. No barber armed with sharp razor would be let close to those locks. He had bright, cheerful eyes and a quizzical expression on his face. He wore a mild yellow flannel shirt and tan cargo pants. On his feet were paint-splattered leather shoes. The laces had been taken off. There would be no lashings on this dude. He sat in a suede green armchair with an open book on the little table beside him. With a kind smile, the dragon beckoned Fred inside. Fred walked through the door. "Hello, how are you today?" he said curtly. "Doing well. What are you out doing?" Fred scratched his forehead with vigor as though whatever was happening below its red surface pained him. "Well, I'm just wandering around. Thought I'd come inside, get some inspiration. I'm also an artist." The man across from Fred smiled. "Oh yeah? What do you do?" he said warmly. Fred nervously squirmed around in his chair. "My third-grade art teacher, Mrs. Goldblum, said I couldn't write whatever I wanted in my creative writing class, and I've been struggling ever since. Plus, I'm getting older, and when you get older, you have to have a job, somewhere to live, and all the rest of it." Fred added with a wry laugh, "I can't spend all my time writing. I got things to do for the bank." As he talked, the man across from him's eyebrows proceeded to raise higher and higher. He could detect no sign of sympathy from the man in the chair. In fact, it seemed to Fred that the man was half-heartedly attempting to hold back a smirk. "How much time do you spend writing?" Fred was taken aback by the directness of the question. "Well, as I told you, I have a lot of work to do for the bank. I never feel ready to write." The man in the green chair began to laugh as though he thought Fred's predicament was funny. This angered Fred. Somewhere deep down in the caverns of his mind, he thought his problem was one to be taken with the utmost respect. The laugh subsided and the man said, "You told me you were a writer, so why the hell do you spend all your time working at the bank?" Fred was beginning to hate the man in front of him. He didn't seem to take anything seriously. "I'm a responsible writer. I went to Drab School of Business. I'm saving my money. I'll retire. Then I'll have time to write. I just got to Branch Head. I'm not throwing it all to the wind to write, goddammit." "I never suggested that. In fact, I didn't mean to suggest anything. But it seems to me that writers generally write," said the man in the green chair. The painter was not a horribly mean dragon. He did not cling to his treasure. He didn't roast brave knights like shish kebabs in their suits of armor. Perhaps because he was too lazy, or because he didn't give a shit about knights. In fact, he couldn't even breathe scorching orange fire. Yet the fire that he did breathe was often perceived to be worse. The dragon said what he thought. Fred went back to his stream of prepared excuses, hoping that this time they would work. He was soon interrupted. "We live in a free country for now. In fact, as far as I can tell, you don't have to do anything. I mean, would you agree that nobody has a gun to your head?" "Sure," Fred said gruffly. "So what are you afraid of?" Fred was livid. The nerve of this man. "I have to do my fucking taxes." The man with the painted shoes was laughing again. "You don't have to do your taxes. You don't die if you don't do your taxes. Yet it seems to me you could write if you actually wanted to. It's like you're creating imaginary obstacles for not doing the thing you pretend to want to do. You could be writing now." Fred couldn't believe someone could be this rude. Must be one of those egocentric artists everyone talks about. Decent people would feel compassion for someone in my predicament. In Fred's mind, the only offense worse than screaming at him was someone laughing at him. "Maybe I'll go home and write, asshole," he yelled. The man in the flannel shirt said, "Good luck," with a chuckle. As Fred stormed out of the studio, the man calmly picked up his book to go back to reading. Weeks of anguish and no writing to show for it, Fred was starting to think that perhaps There was some merit to the questions the dragon had asked. A thought was beginning to tickle its way up from the subconscious. Maybe I'm not a writer. Maybe that's okay. Perhaps a deep love for paperwork is enough. Then he picked up a pen and jotted something silly, something small, just a little bit, down on a piece of paper.